Alrighty, good morning everyone. I had a bit of an interesting video to record today. It's actually a screen recording, as you can see, because it's a culmination of all of these ideas that I've been reading about and thinking about for a long time now. But really what crystallized all of this together was Jacob Imam's interview on Pints of Aquinas with the great question prompt of, is the university system dead? Now, I guess similar to my last video, we're kind of opening a huge bag worth of discussions here. So I don't mean this to be the be-all, end-all in any way. In fact, I think this will be somewhat of a warm-up for a podcast that I record with my brother. But a big part of what Jacob Imam discusses is, number one, the current issues and what has gone wrong with higher education. And then number two, the positive side, what higher education is actually meant to be. And I think this is a very fruitful discussion, maybe for those of us who are considering studying further. I'm currently studying at a college in the US online, but also insights into the true meaning of education and what its role is in our lives as men and women, and its role in the lives of our children as well. So pretty much what I did was I recently found out about Notebook LM, which is, I guess, like a deep research AI model from Google. And I was able to import the transcript from that podcast with Matt Fradd and Jacob to basically distill these points out of it, because they sort of only touch on them here and there in the podcast and then they jump to other topics. So the cool thing about this is that, well, number one, it was able to give me all the ideas in a list, but it also removed the other stuff. So I think it's going to be a really fruitful discussion. So I'm just going to get these documents up here. I'm still learning how to use it, so I basically just copied and pasted off the AI thing onto a Google Doc so I could store it and it didn't change when I asked it to do different things or gave it new sources. But let's see. So I guess I'll start with this, which sort of actually came after. But he's basically talking about this guy, Jacob Imam, has a college called the College of St. Joseph the Worker, where not only are you studying sort of a traditional classical arts, liberal arts curriculum, but they also teach you the carpentry trade. So throughout these 3 or 4 years of study, these students are becoming carpenters and working for a building company which is associated with the college. So they get a degree and they get a trade, and because they've been laboring as apprentices throughout the duration of the degree, they also graduate with no debt. So I think it's a fantastic model in the sense that, practically speaking, it's very advantageous, because not only do you get a degree with no debt, but you also get a trade that you can go and use in the world. But more so for the education, not only are you teaching guys, the intellectual side of life, actually educating them, but you're educating them physically. You're teaching them the importance of work. You're teaching them that you need to balance multiple things in your life at once. They're putting pressure on them in that way. So I think the growth in virtue that they're attaining through this education is possibly even more valuable than the actual degree itself. So Jacob Imam emphasizes that the integration of manual labor and true higher education is not merely practical, but it is essential for creating whole human beings, fostering leadership, rejecting anti-labor attitudes, laziness, and achieving the transformation of the world. The necessary pairing is often conceptualized as unifying the head and the hands, thus rejecting the false dichotomy between the white-collar and the blue-collar worker. Great point that maybe is worth discussing elsewhere, because you might have a blue-collar worker, a tradesman, but sure, if you're like an apprentice and just doing the work, perhaps that reduces the possibility of intellectual work. But he was making the point that the trades can actually be very creative, but I'll also argue that running a trade business is just as intellectual as anything you'll do, and being successful as that is really good. So the necessity of higher education. The intellectual life, particularly through the humanities, provides the crucial context of why one is acting or building. Imam argues that professionals like engineers, scientists, or mathematicians cannot be truly good at their vocations without knowing the key intellectual traditions because they lack the understanding of why they are doing what they're doing. Guiding action and preventing moral blindness. Focusing only on how I can do it without asking why leads to dangerous, ethically blind contributions. Contemplation leading to transformation. The intellectual life is an aspect of the contemplative life. This contemplation involves stepping back to critically analyze societal modes and institutions to determine the best path towards flourishing. The will and the intellect should always flow into action. This must then drive the individual back to the active life so that they can truly be able to live differently. So contemplation leading to transformation. I think this is discussed in the next document where it talks about the flaws, but one of the worst things that you can see in society is people who are very intellectually gifted, but number one, maybe they don't utilize those gifts. Or number two, they have not been able to connect their use of reason to actually acting or living differently. One second, I'll just respond to that message. Sweet. And the final point here of the necessity of higher education is the preservation of truth, preservative of the hard-earned truths of the past so that wisdom can populate people's minds. So where does manual labor and the integration of this fit in? Well, I think manual labor provides the education and the virtue needed to actually be able to implement these things from the intellect. So we have the Christian reclamation of labor. Historically, Greek and Roman society held a philosophical disdain for manual labor, viewing the life of a tradesman as ignoble and inimical to the life of virtue, vulgar. The Christian tradition radically inverted this view because the Word became flesh and picked up a hammer. The same church that founded the first universities also taught the world to love and sanctify and grow through labor. Creative capacity and human flourishing. The modern post-Christian world has taken on the pagan disdain for trades, resulting in the false dichotomy between white-collar and blue-collar. In contrast to the monotonous, mind-numbing work of the assembly line, a system that did crush the creative capacity, the skilled trades involve creative capacity and artistic expression because every job requires troubleshooting unique situations. And again, if you're running a business, we all know all the different skills and virtues that are associated with that. You can't just be unifocal. You need to be multifaceted. Mastery and spiritual perfection. True learning and mastery demand the monotonous grind and long-standing determination that manual work provides, which is the path to the greater perfection of the soul. Addressing real-world crises. There is currently a dire quantity crisis in the trades, 3 people retiring for every 1 entering, leading to a massive quality problem. Integrating intellectual capability addresses this leadership vacuum. Without this integrated approach, the quality of structures, this is a good example, plummets. The average lifespan of a house is now 50 years, compared to hundreds previously, profoundly impacting the spiritual and communal health of those who live in them. Yeah, I think the lack of beauty in architecture is another very good point to illustrate what has gone wrong between this removal of the intellect and virtue from the trades, where it just becomes this sort of purely utilitarian commoditization of absolutely everything, to the point where the buildings we live in are just disgusting. There's no beauty. Even think of the churches that we're building now, they hardly resemble churches at all. They're just completely postmodern, devoid of meaning. And they also don't even work that well. Like, people are getting infected with mold that's growing in these walls because, number one, they're probably built out of rank polystyrene, disgusting materials. But the houses also don't have airflow. They might depend on air conditioning, or they're not prioritizing sunlight and stuff. And anyway, it's just a catastrophe because all of these things are not actually achieving their true ends. So the result of integration, in combining intellectual training with manual labor, you ensure that students are prepared for adult life and empowered to lead. Now, there is a golden point as well, is that a proper university system, you'd go through that system and you should have grown in virtue, you should have grown in intellect, and you should have grown in your ability for your will to exercise the intellect over the body and over your actions. Someone coming out of uni who spent 4 years becoming a trained professional should be ready to jump in the world and be an absolute killer. But no, you've got the stereotype of this useless, lazy uni student who has the degree, but he's never worked a job in his life, he doesn't know how to work hard, and the university is failing at its central goal of actually growing these students in virtue. Educating the intellect is completely pointless with a lack of virtue, because you can have the best formed intellect ever, but if you don't have the virtue to exercise basic things like self-control and perseverance and getting a real job and building a business and providing value to society, it doesn't matter if you've got a PhD. It literally does not matter. It has no bearing on reality. So, true adult formation. By pairing the head and the hands, students gain real skills and real virtue. This education delivers a new way of living, modes of prayer, work, and study that serves as a launch pad for them to become the powerful leader that the world needs them to be. Treating college as an emergence into adulthood rather as an extension of adolescence. Man, that's insane, because when I dropped out of uni the first time, well, I guess the only time, but back in 2020, I remember saying these exact words to someone, that it seems like people at this university are treating it as an extension of their high school years or as an extension of their adolescence, where they're just partying, leaving things till last minute. They're just half-assing everything. They're just picking random subjects because, it seems like there's a good thing to do. There's no intentionality, no discipline, no virtue. It's an extension of adolescence. But it needs to be an emergence into adulthood. It needs to be the training ground of leaders and of virtue. So this was a side point that I asked AI to analyze, the relationship between manual labor and the true higher education. But now if I come to this initial document, which is the initial analysis of the podcast, he talks about the core purpose of true higher education and some of those failures, and then his model for his college, the College of St. Joseph the Worker. I'm actually going to move these failures up here and discuss them first. So Jacob Imam provided extensive insights regarding the role and necessity of true higher education, distinguishing its intended historical and spiritual function from its current shortcomings. Boy, there are some juicy tidbits in here. Failures of modern higher education. Imam critiques the modern university system for losing its foundational pillars. Firstly, loss of discipline and wisdom. Discipline and docility to authority are replaced by student coddling and grade inflation. Professors often teach the most boring and the most insidious forms of conformity and political correctness, instead of passing on the wisdom of the past. Now, I remember as a young political science student back in 2020, and I signed up for a course that was titled Introduction to New Zealand Politics. Majority of the course was good because you sort of learn about the New Zealand political system, but the very first lecture was an entire hour denouncing the evils of the British for having come to New Zealand and colonized the pagan Māori, and how unfair it was and how we lied to them in the translations of the treaty, and X, Y, Z, completely unrelated to politics in general, but then there's also this weird thing. It's like, well, if you're denouncing Britain for colonizing it, well then shouldn't you also denounce democracy and the entire fabric of the modern structure that we live in? Like, if you're denouncing that, then well, why don't you go live with cannibal tribes in bloody Papua New Guinea if this is all so bad? But anyway, yeah, they're not actually sort of teaching what they're meant to. Service to the administrative state. The modern university primarily serves its great patron, which is the administrative state. Yeah, I mean, universities are subsidized the crap out of, therefore they charge ridiculous amounts of money for stuff that's probably not worth as much. But it's obviously also a problem that students are left with great debt on something with a degree that I think means less and less in the modern world, given the ability to just make money and start a business from your laptop. But I think the reason why degrees were valued in the past was not, again, it wasn't for that intellectual knowledge. It was actually for the fact that a student or a young person having committed to 3 to 6 years of disciplined and regimented study would usually be a productive and competent member of society, at least back in the day. It's just because universities are not doing that anymore, the finished product isn't what it used to be. So I guess employers are valuing that a lot less. Professors as employees. A major problem is that many professors view their task as a job rather than a vocation. They may become lazy, repeating old lectures, and not doing the necessary hard research to bring luminous truths to light. I mean, I probably don't have to elaborate on this anymore. I'm sure we've all seen it, but lazy teachers and lazy professors, what a blight on the world, because often they're the only ones who hold that unique privilege of being able to teach someone something. People are paying to sit in front of you and learn at the feet of Western civilization, and you're not showing up on time, you're not preparing the material, as it says, you're just repeating, bloody going off the script, just showing up, clocking in the hours, doing the bare minimum, marking my essays late. And before you know it, instead of being a unique formative experience, like I love hearing stories, Dr. Peter Kwasensky, also on Matt Fradd, gave this story of how his political science professor, not political science, might have been political science, changed his life by teaching Plato's Republic in that course. And you know, I've had it myself with specific teachers. I guess it might sound a bit weird to say, but Jordan Peterson, when I was young, 17, 18, 19, in some ways he was very much a teacher to me because I was listening to his lectures and reading his books. And it wasn't necessarily the content that he himself discussed, although that was certainly very valuable, but he pointed me in the right direction. He pointed me to Plato, he pointed me to Aristotle, he pointed me to all of these great thinkers of the Western tradition, and then I went and studied that. And that was when I really learned, and that was when I really developed within myself. A professor who absconds his duty, who does not see his teaching, his professorship as a vocation, is just a letdown, because someone who's not truly passionate and fired up for that is never going to be able to change students' lives, because that doesn't happen when you're just showing up for work. It doesn't happen when you're doing the bare minimum. It's like that zeal, that charisma. You know, you have to be able to light someone on fire in the same way that you have. So the essential nature and historical origin of true education, the necessity of authority and discipline. Real education demands both discipline and authority. Authority operates as something given from the higher to the lower, from teacher to student. Without that submission of the student to authority and the professor actually embracing the discipline that is needed to teach these kids and teach these young men and women, Well, it all kind of falls apart. Yeah, we're all equals. People show up late. They bring food into class. I mean, the importance of dress comes in here as well. I'm not sure if that's discussed. I think it is discussed further on, but it's like, actually, no, this is something very serious that we're doing right now. So a principal pillar denied. If a society questions hierarchy and authority, adopting a flat egalitarian worldview, that necessarily denies one of the principal pillars of education. Birthright of Christendom. Universities were not pagan institutions, but were birthed out of Christendom during the Middle Ages. They are our institutions, and the Church should not abandon the concept of the university, but must find reasons and new models for reclaiming them. Holistic and unified learning. True university education is holistic, aiming to bring unity out of diversity. Okay, kind of a bland point. The core purpose of true higher education. Imam argued that true higher education must go beyond simply financial or mere educational benefits. It must go beyond a utilitarian specialization, divulgement of knowledge so I can do X job. Preserving hard-earned truths, true education must ensure that the beautiful truths that tradition has labored to uncover will persist and be carried forwards. It must be a preservative of the hard-earned truths of the past. Transforming the world. The preservation of truth is necessary for the transformation of the world into the kingdom of God. Forming leaders and instilling a new way of life. Yeah, transforming the world, I guess just thinking on that. The university shouldn't, in some ways it has to be insulated in order to be able to preserve and form, and then people go out. But it should have that outwards oriented approach of transforming the world. You know, what we're doing here is essential for society. Forming leaders and instilling a new way of life. True education is meant to deliver a new way of living. It should establish a new pattern and order for one's life, modes of prayer, work, and study that define the rest of one's adulthood, not just the college years. It's a launch pad for students to become the powerful leader that the world needs them to be. Supporting contemplation and action. The intellectual life is an aspect of the contemplative life. This contemplation involves taking a step back to think critically, asking if societal modes, systems, and institutions are actually achieving human flourishing. Crucially, the contemplative life must drive people back to the active life so that they can truly be able to live differently. Guarding against internal attacks. Here's a cool one. Historically, the university was seen as a paramilitary organization, paramilitary in orientation. I already love the aspect of the university as being a military where you're training these people up. The generals are the professors, inspiring, leading, taking charge. Just as the military guards a nation from external threats, the university guards it from internal attacks, from ideology and propaganda that washes away our intellects and our minds. It guards from internal attacks, from ideology and propaganda that washes away our intellects and our minds. Doesn't that sound like exactly what schools and universities are doing? Brainwashing us with ideology and propaganda, stripping us from our intellects, our minds, and our creativity. Imam's model for true higher education, the College of St. Joseph the Worker. Imam described the college he founded as an alternative model prioritizing true education by addressing the financial, intellectual, and formative shortcomings of the current system. Intellectual and manual labor integration. The college is for academically promising students to earn a bachelor's degree, studying the Catholic intellectual tradition, while simultaneously training in the skilled trades to earn a journeyman's card. This pairs the intellectual life, the head, and manual labor, the hands, rejecting the false dichotomy between white collar and blue collar. Students are paid to train. Focus on mastery over quick fixes. The college tries to get away from screens and digital technologies that promote minimal input for a pretty substantially different output. True mastery requires monotonous grind and long-standing determination, which leads to the greater perfection of the soul. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Things need to be hard. Degrees need to be hard. Otherwise, if they're easy, then they achieve nothing. You don't change in a place of comfort. You change when you're actually challenged. Instilling order and virtue. The culture enforces a strict understanding of hierarchy and order, calling authorities sir or doctor, being 15 minutes early for class, as an example. This order is necessary for achieving real freedom and greater creative capacity, much like the disciplined practice required of a pianist. Yeah, I love that. When I studied at Campion College, which I guess was the only place where I sort of actually studied in person. It was only at UC for a couple of weeks, but I called all the professors sir or doctor. Me and my mates would always try and dress smart casual or dress. Probably for half of the year, I do like polos, collared shirt. Sometimes I do collared shirt and tie. A good amount of time I also wore a suit jacket, but it was always about cultivating that exterior presence of me coming here to receive, of me taking the institution seriously, me taking the professor seriously, putting myself in a state of seriousness, of receptivity. And I think that's a beautiful culture to build up. And it has to be built by the professors as well. It can't just be the students. But, I can already see the difference. I had one great professor, Dr. Shavura. He would always wear suit, dress shirt and tie, suspenders sometimes. But the way he carried himself exteriorly, the way he always showed up early to his lectures, the way he was always prepared, the students took that class much more seriously than they did others by virtue of the professor taking himself and the class seriously. So this culture needs to be actively reinforced and built. I mean, you think of a modern secular university, what's the stereotype? People rocking up to class in their pajamas and stuff? Not good, not conducive to order and virtue. And finally, the final principle of St. Joseph the College Worker College, adult formation. Students are expected to assume adult responsibility. So they live in houses that are owned by the college, but they maintain the houses themselves. They pay for the utilities. They cook for themselves. There's no cafeteria. There's no meal plan. You need to bloody learn how to cook for yourself. Ensuring the college is not merely an extension of adolescence. So yeah, I think that was a very fruitful podcast and very fruitful breakdown here. I think it also illustrates how short our current educational institution is falling, from primary to high school to tertiary. And I think it also inspires me a lot. I don't really know what God will call me, will call the people around me, will call the missions and initiatives around me too, but I think if something like the College of St. Joseph the Worker ends up being developed here in New Zealand or Australia, I think that would be immensely fruitful, because every single thing that we've talked about is either weakened or missing in modern educational institutions. So I think to be able to counteract that in a serious, strong, professional, faithful institution that creates leaders, that creates competent, productive, good, disciplined, virtuous individuals to then go into society and proclaim the gospel and start businesses and share these principles, no, what better thing could you do? What better thing could you do than teach a student how to live virtuously and to have him live a fruitful and holy life after having gone through your school or your class? What better influence could you have on the world? Anyway, we'll leave that there. I was thinking of possibly live streaming this, but it was just impossible to get the software set up. I hope my screen recording and camera recording on the trusty old MacBook has actually worked here, but we'll piece those together and release it. If you enjoyed it, please let me know. If you want this to be broken down more, again, I think it is definitely worth discussing on a podcast, on the Fit for the Kingdom podcast, but yeah, please let me know your thoughts. Please subscribe and follow me across social media so we can continue to grow the mission and spread the message. If you wish to support me financially, I don't really have anything up for that at the moment. Yeah, I'm going to be releasing some material through Gumroad, like some downloadable PDFs and stuff, so slowly working on that. But go to the Fit for the Kingdom website. You can donate to Fit for the Kingdom. Anything else? Yeah, well, thanks for watching. Please share this around, support the mission, and pray for me as well. And pray for the future of whatever God is calling me to and whatever God is calling Fit for the Kingdom to. But yeah, pray you have a great day. God bless.